Hello, this is episode 68 of the podcast called Blood and Rain. I'm your host, Arthur Dane. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. It is forbidden to kill, therefore, all murderers are punished unless they kill in large numbers and to the sound of trumpets. War must be while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour all. But I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I only love that which they defend. Only the dead have seen the end of war. Older men declare war, but it is youth that must fight and die. If you win, you need not have to explain. If you lose, you should not be there to explain. Listen up, there's no war that will end all wars. Many think that life is war, but in reality, it is counterinsurgency. Never think that war, no matter how necessary nor how justified, is not a crime. All war is a symptom of man's failure as a thinking animal. Those are various quotes on war and counterinsurgency from the likes of George Orwell, Voltaire, J.R.R. Tolkien, Plato, Herbert Hoover, Jocko Willink, Adolf Hitler, Haruki Murakami, Ernest Hemingway, and the Bay Area's own John Steinbeck. A distillation, maybe a condensed version of a J.R.R. Tolkien quote that I think best captures it is from G.K. Chesterton. The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. If you have been following me at all, whether in the past 6 months or in the past 2 years now, on various platforms of content creation, whether Instagram or Spotify or Substack, Twitter, it is clear to many of you that there is some root in combat, in fighting, in counterinsurgency, in war. But many of you have seen me shout war in all caps across many platforms, in various group chats, in various aesthetic posts on Instagram. And some of you who haven't been following me for very long have made the mistake that this is a recent development. But in reality, this is an outward expression of something that I've known consciously and subconsciously for some time. I've been very open about the influence on my work from Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, author, podcast host. The format of this podcast was modeled after the format from the Jocko podcast. I've read Discipline Equals Freedom cover to cover 4 times. His work has had an impact on how I've approached my faith and many other aspects of life. And he expressed this understanding of life that I've known for some time. And maybe I've known as far back as 9 years old. And the reason why these roots were set so early and go back so far stems from an avid love of history that I inherited from my father, particularly military history. And whether directly or indirectly, I managed to internalize these essences of war. Now, to say everything is war to many of you who are not necessarily vitalist would see this as such, would see this as just another revamped expression of something by some of the likes of Mike Ma or Bronze Age Pervert, etc. Pick your favorite vitalist. But in reality, it's stemming from real life experience. It's stemming from a view of life that is not necessarily black pilled, but isn't going to bank on great men theory or even a macro belief in God by many people in the West. When I was 22 years old, many of you know this story. I quit my Silicon Valley job. I decided to be a fighter. And I worked in bars as a bouncer and as a bar back. And this is the time I came to Orthodox Christianity. And I looked around me and I swore I wanted to scream. More painful than being at war is not knowing that you're at war. It's to be consumed by the various enemies, the various unseen foes. It's very sad to see. Many people will live their lives thinking that a kind of hedonism is okay. That the social decay we see around us is in fact the norm. And while social decay is nothing new, this brand is particularly effective. Effective at making you believe that it's always been this way. And it's important to see through things, not just to see things, but to see through things. And I looked at these people around me in these degenerate environments, and I saw maybe some people who could see what some would call the background world, could see reality, reality in its rawest form, whether reality in prayer or reality in true presence in situations that are vital, situations that are life or death, whether death by the sword or death financially, what have you. And there's a particular night in the fall of 2017 that I remember. I came home after bar backing and after significant training, after work. It was a Saturday night bar backing shift, and I was bar backing for about 4 different bartenders. And when 2 a.m. came, all of my coworkers decided to take shots and sort of cut loose. But I put my headphones in and sped things up because I knew I needed to get out of there as soon as possible so I could train. And there was a girl I worked with. She was older than me. I think she was 30 or 29 at the time, and I knew she had a crush on me, but um, you know, I was in such a state of intentional singleness that like I really tried to strip that away, in my perception of her, and just really try to be friends with her because as a person I liked her quite a bit. Um, And, to get my attention, as I'm running around bar backing, she kind of stops me, puts a hand on my shoulder. I'm listening to Bring Me the Horizon in my headphones. And she takes the headphones out of my ears and she says, "Can I play a song for you?" And I was like, sort of taken aback. I said, "Sure." And she puts on a song called Roads by 90s glitch hop band Portishead. kind of stopped me in my tracks before I switched to my typical music and carried on. After training in the gym, when I got home, I sat and listened to the song again and actually heard the lyrics this time. In particular, can't anybody see we got a war to fight? And in this case, it's everywhere. You see a lot of quotes these days, quotes on Instagram, particularly, I'm paraphrasing, but how awful would it be to be on your deathbed and meet the person you could have become? There's a war in that. There's a war not succumbing to that. There's a war in each and every there's a war in each and every single day. Each and every single day. And fighting that. And it's quiet. I think the most important quote that I read was the truth about life, the kind of war that we find ourselves in, by Jocko Willink, saying, life isn't war, life is counterinsurgency. Well, what's the difference? Well, war is outright, the enemy right in front of you that's attacking you at all times. Counterinsurgency is not hot war, but it can catch you slipping. You need to be ready at all times. Hurry up and wait, but also be alert. You have the war against succumbing to sloth, succumbing to settling. You have the war against all things preventing you, and in some ways sharpening you to rise to your truest potential. You have a war in maintaining faith. The soul is willing, but the flesh is weak. We are unable to subdue our flesh to reflect the desires of the soul. What are the desires of the soul? Well, if you're Orthodox like myself, the desire of the soul is salvation. And to feel the weight of sin every single day, to prevent that is war every single day. It's the war for your thoughts. Any man on Instagram in November saw on the news feed an uptick in racy videos, an uptick in videos even saying something of the like of, why would you participate in No Nut November? Getting you to slip, getting you to slip into addiction. And worse than addiction, escapism itself. Escaping. Escaping into what? Nothing, really. There's a war for your children. There's a war every single day, making sure that not only are they kept out of physical harm's way, but kept out of mental harm's way. This is the war in schooling. This is the war. This is the war on sloth in raising your children. Not opting out of parenting, not giving yourself a break by handing them the iPad instead of being a parent, having the device parent them for you. And then slipping into something like TikTok, slipping into something that could lead their minds, their hearts astray, reaching a point of no return. And by the time they're 18 years old, they're completely out of control. This is the war for the next generation. This is the war for the souls of your children. The war for your country, not from any external threat, from an internal threat. The anti-culture that comes from various sources of power that wish to expand their power in Silicon Valley, neocons, interests that are indeed run by foreign powers in some instances, in some situations. We fight this war not only with information, with being as informed as we can be, but with our actions. You have the war against every single little agenda they have for you. This is sometimes the shouting of various comical libertarians saying they will never eat the bugs, they will never live in the pod, but that is the war we're fighting. And while the Great Reset has somewhat toned down as an agenda, still, if you are not of the opinion that the current regime does not wish to expand its power, then you don't know the war around you. There's a battle to fight in every single second of every single day, part of this overarching war. I'll tell you the war I have every single day myself. From the very first moment I wake up, the first war is to cross myself, to not dwindle. The first war is to make my bed in the morning, plain and simple. The next war is to pray, to not be led astray, to start my day in faith, to start my day praying not only out of obedience, not only out of discipline, not only praying for others, but praying to God to know God and to therefore know who I am. The highest part of the hierarchy being the first thing that is dealt with in the day. The war to eat the food that I don't want to eat while I'm half asleep. The war to grab the things that I should have prepped the night before to speed on the highway a half hour to the gym. The war on every set, the war on every rep, the war on every thought that creeps into my mind that is unnecessary. The war to maintain my schedule. The war to do the mundane tasks that are not attractive, that don't appear as war, like screaming under a barbell or kicking the bag in preparation for a title fight. Why is this? Because overarching new life, I have multiple wars I'm fighting. I have the war for my soul. I have the war to become a world champion because the fights in the ring are the height of war, but it's a 24/7. It is recovery. It is eating. It is sparring. It is pad work. It is all these things. It is always stepping into the ring as just the most attractive part of it. The war on my mind from thoughts that are unnecessary when writing. The war against distractions while writing. The books that I need to complete. The war on the self that will not open my heart to the woman I love. You hear You hear people like Jocko, you hear people like David Goggins talk about war in contexts that have to do with war as we know it, kinetic war, physical suffering. But oftentimes these things are met with a kind of alienation. My people say, well, my life isn't really like that. My life isn't those realms, but you could find parallels in every single pursuit that they have in their lives with the same essence, the same struggle that is war. Something they're eating is poisoning them. They're not aware of, the seed oil mafia that many people like to highlight in this corner of the internet. They're not aware of what's invading their ears subconsciously, this pop music that Sarah from Rose talked about. It subtly, subconsciously programs the mind. What they're seeing on the television subtly programming the mind. They're not aware that their family is slipping away and that there's something they can do. And the war is on the thoughts that are second guessing themselves and the action that they can take. It's the war on inaction itself. Someone is always coming for you somewhere, and sometimes that someone is you. Even when we're resting, when we're supposed to be resting, some people might not think that's very war. What's the task at hand? Fighting off anything that is preventing you from truly resting, from being at peace. It is everywhere. It is unavoidable. It is all consuming. It is the war that is life. The sooner one accepts this, the sooner one can actually start living. And there's joy in this, to be perfectly honest. There's joy in struggle, there's joy in war. And sometimes living life this way is tiring. Sometimes living life this way is draining. But what outweighs this is carrying the knowledge, carrying the truth that you're actually fighting the good fight on every single front when one does so. That you're constantly advancing. And this oftentimes, when done diligently, has a ripple effect that is immeasurable. The impact you can make on your parents, the impact you can make on your extended family, your friends, your circle, strangers, even. Have a war to make content daily, and then months down the line, I get messages saying, thanks to you, I'm an Orthodox catechumen. Thanks to you, I've started Muay Thai. Thanks to you, I've begun to write. Thanks to you, I'm pursuing a career in surgery. There's the war to actually produce content that can inspire like that. Maybe someone somewhere listening. Maybe not now because there's only 3 people here at the moment, but someone might have that. Someone might have that creative spark, and their war is overcoming the doubt that is preventing them from acting upon it. And someone might ask the question, well, isn't this effort of war antithetical with a lot of other modes of life? Not necessarily, no. What about an enjoyment? What about in a celebration with family and friends? Well, what's the war there? The war against you getting in your own head about it and just being present with those you love in celebration. So when it comes down to it, everything is a one or a zero, a yes or a no, a victory or a defeat. And I'm sure a hell of a lot of people are very tired of losing. To stop losing. Declare war, wage war on every single front. And in this, I can promise you, is the most immense kind of joy. Good night. Good storms. God bless. Thank you.